He preferred to stalk under the cloak of darkness, moving silently through the night, a phantom in the shadows. Carl Eugene Watt, a name synonymous with terror, struck fear into the hearts of many. He became known as the Sunday morning slasher, a moniker that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it, a chilling title earned through his gruesome acts, each more horrifying than the last. Watts left a trail of blood and heartbreak across America, his crimes spanning multiple states and leaving countless families in mourning. His victims, often chosen at random, were subjected to unimaginable horrors, their lives forever scarred by his brutality. Watts's reign of terror, spanning from the late 1970s to the early 1980s, left communities paralyzed with fear, unable to feel safe even in their own homes. The Sunday morning slasher became a grim spectre, haunting the thoughts of many, a constant reminder of the evil that lurked in the darkness. His crimes were not merely acts of violence, they were calculated personal invasions that left a lasting impact on his victims. They were personal invasions of the most terrifying kind, where the victims felt the cold grip of death closing in on them. Watts toyed with his victims, often strangling them to the brink of death, only to revive them and prolong their suffering, a sadistic game that he seemed to relish. His motive remained a mystery, shrouded in darkness, just like the man himself. Even today, the true reasons behind his monstrous actions are unknown, adding to the chilling legacy of the Sunday morning slasher. Watts's reign of terror was not confined to a single city or state. He was a phantom, drifting from place to place, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Michigan, Texas, Canada. His hunting ground knew no bounds. His methods were as varied as the locations he terrorized. Some victims were stabbed, others bludgeoned, all subjected to his perverse desires. He preyed on women, often targeting those he perceived as vulnerable. His crimes were brazen, committed in broad daylight, and secluded areas alike. The randomness of his attacks only amplified the terror. No one knew who would be next. The fear was palpable, a suffocating blanket of dread that settled over every town he visited. Watts' modus operandi was as chilling as it was baffling. He operated on impulse, a slave to a dark and insatiable urge. There was no pattern to his victims, no specific type he sought out. He killed because he could, driven by a force he himself couldn't comprehend. This unpredictability made him even more dangerous. Law enforcement grappled with the randomness, their efforts frustrated by the lack of a discernible pattern. His crimes were acts of opportunity, fueled by a twisted desire for control and domination. Each attack was swift and brutal, leaving little evidence behind. Watts was a ghost, appearing and disappearing at will, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives. 12 innocent lives were definitively claimed by Watts's hand. 12 families forever scarred by the loss of their loved ones. But the true number of his victims remains a haunting question mark. Some estimates suggest the number could be as high as 80. The lack of concrete evidence, coupled with Watts's transient lifestyle, makes it difficult to connect him to every suspected murder. He moved through the shadows, leaving behind whispers and doubts, but rarely concrete proof. The families of the missing cling to hope, even as the years turn into decades. But the chilling truth remains. Many families may never know the fate of their loved ones. The uncertainty, the agonizing not knowing, is perhaps the cruelest legacy of the Sunday morning slasher. Section 5. Silence in the system. Law enforcement lapses. The hunt for Carl Eugene Watt was hampered by a lack of communication and coordination between law enforcement agencies. Despite the severity of his crimes, the fragmented nature of the police force at the time made it difficult to track his movements effectively. In the days before national databases and widespread information sharing, his cross-country killing spree exposed a critical flaw in the system. Each police department had its own records, and there was no efficient way to connect the dots between similar cases in different states. Police departments operated in silos, unaware of similar crimes occurring in other jurisdictions. This isolation meant that patterns in Watts's behavior went unnoticed for far too long. This lack of awareness allowed Watts to stay one step ahead, moving from state to state before suspicion could solidify. He exploited the gaps in the system, knowing that crossing a state line often meant starting with a clean slate. The silence between agencies allowed a monster to roam free. Each missed connection, each unshared piece of information, was another opportunity for Watts to continue his reign of terror. Precious time was lost, and more innocent lives were sacrificed to Watts's depravity. The clock was ticking, but without a unified effort, the police were always a step behind. His case would later serve as a stark reminder of the need for greater cooperation and information sharing among law enforcement. Today, advancements in technology and interagency communication aim to prevent such lapses, ensuring that no criminal can exploit the system's weaknesses as Watts did. Section 6. Scars on the Soul, a Legacy of Loss. The psychological impact of Watts's crimes on the victims' families is immeasurable. The sudden and violent nature of their loved ones' deaths left an unfillable void, the fear, the anger, the unending grief. These emotions became constant companions. Their lives were forever changed, irrevocably marked by the tragedy. The world no longer felt safe, and the simple joys of life were tainted with sorrow. Some found solace in support groups, sharing their pain with others who understood their unique brand of grief. But for others, the wounds remained too deep to heal. The legacy of the Sunday morning slasher continued to haunt their dreams, a constant reminder of the loved ones stolen too soon. Section 7. The hunter becomes the hunted. Capture in Texas. In a twist of fate, it was a botched burglary, not murder, that finally brought Watts down. In 1982, in Houston, Texas, he was apprehended while attacking two women in their apartment complex. His reign of terror was over. The man who had instilled fear in so many was now behind bars. The relief was palpable, a collective sigh of relief echoing across the nation. The system had finally caught up with him. His capture marked the beginning of a long and arduous legal process. The families of his victims finally had their day in court, their voices heard, their pain acknowledged. Section 8. A Twisted Mind Confesses. Watts's Chilling Admissions. Watts's confessions were as chilling as the crimes themselves. He spoke of his victims with a detached curiosity, as if recounting a mundane event. There was no remorse, no empathy, only a cold, calculating recounting of his actions. He seemed to relish in the details, describing the terror in his victims' eyes as they realized their fate. His words sent shivers down the spines of those present, painting a vivid picture of the darkness that resided within him. His confessions provided a glimpse into the mind of a monster, a mind devoid of empathy or compassion. It was a sobering reminder of the depths of human depravity and the fragility of life. Section 9. A Life for a Life, Justice but No Closure. Carl Eugene Watt was eventually sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His crimes had terrorized communities and shattered countless lives. The courtroom, filled with an air of solemnity, bore witness to the final judgment. The gavel's echo marked the end of a long and arduous journey for justice. Justice, in the eyes of the law, had been served. The legal system had done its part, ensuring that Watts would never walk free again. The judge's stern expression reflected the gravity of the crimes committed and the weight of the sentence handed down. But for the families of his victims, there was no true closure, no solace in his incarceration. The pain of losing a loved one to such senseless violence is a wound that never fully heals. Each day, they are reminded of the empty spaces left behind, the birthdays and holidays that will never be the same. Their loved ones were gone, and the pain of their loss lingered like a persistent ache. The memories of happier times are now tinged with sorrow, and the future feels uncertain and bleak. The empty chair at the dinner table, the old family photos, all serve as constant reminders of what was taken from them. The sentencing brought a sense of finality, but it could never erase the scars left by Watts's actions. The physical bars of his prison cell are a stark contrast to the invisible bars that now confine the hearts of those he hurt. The emotional and psychological scars run deep, affecting not just the immediate victims but entire communities. The Sunday morning slasher may have been behind bars, but his shadow continued to loom large. The fear he instilled in his victims and their families did not dissipate with his imprisonment. His name became synonymous with terror, a dark chapter in the annals of criminal history. His case served as a stark reminder of the darkness that can reside in the human heart and the importance of vigilance and awareness in a world where monsters often walk among us. It is a call to remember the victims, to support the survivors, and to strive for a society where such horrors are not repeated. The pursuit of justice is ongoing, and the fight against such evil must never wane.